Welcome back to Seek Strength and welcome back to Seekistan. Today we're reacting to Aaron Nice. He's a freshman linebacker for Bridgewater College, and in this video he cleans 202 kilos. Now you probably saw this video and a lot of you tagged us in this. It went minorly viral across the Instagram space that you would be interacting with. It was on ESPN College Football. So reasonably large, but incredibly impressive lift.
It's such a nice clean.
So before we talk about it, let's just look at it. Let's just rewatch it. So we're just at the end of celebrations here. So 202 kilos in pounds, I assume. It's a great clean.
It's such a good clean. So before we get into any of the technical aspects or any of that, he's a college freshman. I think he's 18.
And according to his Instagram bio, he's still 18.
And he's cleaning 202.5 kilos and he's not even a weightlifter.
So the interesting thing we saw with this is I'd never seen him before, but he's actually coached by Travis Mash of Mash Performance, who produces a lot of very strong people.
He produces a lot of very strong football players as well. Like, it's not just weightlifters and powerlifters.
So if we look at Aaron's Instagram, he does a lot of weightlifting, but if he's playing college football, I think it's D3 upon investigation. It's still a good level of football, so it wouldn't be fair to just call him a weightlifter. Even if he was a weightlifter, this is still a phenomenal clean. You know, for an 18-year-old, it's incredible, who's somewhere between, I would say, 85 and 95 kilos. There's kind of two aspects to this, though. There's the lift itself and what a lot of great things about it, but there's also a lot of interesting aspects around it in regards to just a footballer cleaning this heavy.
Yeah.
What do you want to do first there?
What I want to do first is just the technical aspect of the clean and why it's so good. So usually we have like hallmarks of like a football power clean or an athlete's power clean and the things they do wrong, right? So usually a fair bit of arm bend. A lot of the time arm bend even starting as they pull the barbell off the floor. We don't see this at all here. Especially we don't see arm bend as he finishes his second pull. So a lot of athletes, because they mightn't have had as much technical coaching with the clean, or they might just have had incorrect coaching, as the barbell comes from the knee up to the point of contact, they'll start to roll the bar in and bend their elbow. We don't see any of that here, right? So obviously that's a huge no-no. He does this perfectly. The second hallmark tends to be a massive amount of hip contact or quad contact or just smashy contact where the barbell then deviates out away from them and kind of have it as a loopy bar path. So the bar path goes from a nice straight bar path or even sweeping back up in towards the quads. Then once it makes contact, the contact is far too kind of lateral, going from the back to the front. And then it causes the bar to loop out around and smash down on them. We see none of that here. So we see a very, very nice vertical extension. We see the contact not being overly emphasized. And then a very, very nice bar path following on from the end of the second pull. So technically, it's a very, very nice clean.
So there's three good things you can take away from this. So a lot of weightlifters watching, but obviously a lot of non-weightlifters who do some cleans. So the first thing he is doing incredibly well, or the most important thing to think about for both groups, is when we're looking at the clean, we really want to be emphasized on the pull underneath. So how fast you get underneath the barbell, not minimizing bar height, but certainly not overemphasizing bar height. So the speed you get under in the clean is all about the pull under. And the most important thing is not the contact in the clean, it's pulling under. So you are making some contact, but I want you to rethink about the contact point. I want you to reframe it, rename it in your head from the contact point to the pull under point. And this helps a lot of athletes think about, when I get to the barbell to this contact point, I'm not thinking about making contact. I'm thinking about pulling under the barbell as fast as possible. And there's a great example of the Kazakhstan U team are very good at this in terms of pulling under the barbell really aggressively. And Aaron does the same thing. He's super fast underneath the barbell. And this gives you a lot of benefits, not only for cleaning more weight, but also in terms of being a faster athlete and getting more speed strength out of the clean. If you're pulling under more aggressively, you're getting more of those benefits. The second thing Aaron does incredibly well is he uses a very, very tasteful dynamic start. So it's not often you'll see players who are not specifically weightlifters who can use a really succinct and very precise dynamic start. And he uses this kind of single pump dynamic start, which we're very, very big fans of. Keeps his hamstrings just above parallel as the barbell starts moving. So he's in that very traditional textbook style dynamic start position, which, to be honest, the vast majority of people should be striving to use with some alterations depending on body length, limb length and other mobility issues around that. But again, you're aiming for that style of position. And Aaron uses this style of start position, the single pump hip start position. We're getting more force in the initial pull, more ground reactive forces. What's very important in the clean is we've got this 2 tempo speed, but in comparison to the snatch, the first pull of the clean is faster than the first pull of the snatch because we need to hit higher speeds because the barbell is heavier in the clean and we need to lift that barbell with more effort essentially. So Aaron does both of these things incredibly well.
Now, I think something else about a football player doing this versus a weightlifter doing this is undoubtedly the level of hype.
Yes.
That doesn't happen in any weightlifting gym in the world.
I don't know whether I like that much hype.
I'm all about it.
Yeah, that's from the rugby thing though.
Yeah, like, would you be a man for like a slap on the ass as you're running out in the field?
No.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think nothing better than a good butt slap.
Butt slap. Smack.
Slap. Swat to the rear.
And they slap hard. Butt slapper. Butt tapper.
Patting on the butt. Quick pop. Whack. Bang. Oh, whew.
No. Maybe. No.
Yeah,
No.
just a little slap on the ass.
Now, moving on from the misogyny of rugby and football, what we have is the idea that a high level or nearing high level, he's only 18, football player would be doing something like this. And it's very, very interesting because he doesn't need this to be a good player. But we were talking about a lot recently about how important it is to be strong as an athlete and how essentially about maybe up to half of your rate of force development capabilities, your power production capabilities are based on your maximal strength. And this is something that's been known for decades. Not only is doing the high velocity work important, but also being strong, that high force work is very, very important. So when we have an athlete like this who can do a 202 kilo clean. Of course, we're displaying high levels of speed strength, we're high levels of athleticism, but what we're also displaying is simply high levels of force production because weightlifting requires you to be able to produce a lot of force because the weights are increasingly heavier. So were he only front squatting 202 kilos, that within itself would be a very useful and very, very high level of performance for most specifically young college athletes. You know, the fact that if he was even front squatting 202, let alone the fact that he is able to do 202.
See, I think the other thing, a lot of the time people are talking about like performance on the field. They'll talk about it in all kind of team sports where, they don't need to do that much strength training because, right? So soccer player doesn't need that much strength training because they don't produce a lot, or they don't need to produce a lot of force when they're tackling. They mightn't have any direct contact. Obviously in football, you have a lot of direct contact, but the amount of force you're applying and the amount of time you're applying that force for may not necessarily be that high. But on the alternative end of this, people think about performance as being this kind of acute thing, right? So it's this acute thing. It's the time point when you're on the field, or the time point when you're making a tackle, or the time point when you're bursting through a defensive line. But if you just take injury risk or the resilience against injury, you being able to do a 202 kilo clean makes you much, much, much more resilient to injury than somebody who can do a 102 kilo clean, and that is oftentimes everybody falls subject to this is like we only think about performance in the direct outcomes of the performance. So we think about being able to sprint faster so then you can score more touchdowns or more tries or whatever. You might be able to think about hitting harder so you can take down bigger players or take down players more often. But in fact, this kind of strength training as well is so unbelievably useful in terms of just getting more player hours, being injured less, being less out of training due to injury.
Now, one of the important things Dara said there in regards to his choice of words was being able to do a 202 kilo clean and not necessarily doing the 202 kilo clean. So were I coaching Aaron, for example, I probably wouldn't ever let him get to 202 because while Dara was talking about the ability or having the ability to do 202 does provide a lot of potential injury prevention abilities and kind of puts you in a place where you can resist a lot of forces. You are very strong through a large range of motion, the full depth squat and any hits you might take from those kind of angles or the forces your ligaments and tendons go through. But the training that gets you to 202 is the more important aspect here rather than doing the 202 itself. So technically there's no real benefit to doing the 202, or it's very, 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 very minor, unless of course he was doing sets and reps across multiple weeks with the 202. Now, of course, there's a lot of psychological benefit for him to do this 202. And, of course, he likes very clearly pushing the weights.
Yeah.
No one cleans 202 without having the desire to maximize performance. But what's really important here is the years and months of training that got him to that 202 rather than actually doing it. And in fact, you could argue that not doing it at all would be a better scenario in some senses. if you wanted to argue that, especially for an athlete who's not a weightlifter.
100%. Yeah, the analogy that always comes to mind for me is like somebody driving an Audi Quattro, right? Or like a 4-wheel drive Subaru versus somebody who's just driving a Ford Mondeo or something like that. For 360 days of the year, you'll have absolutely no use for the 4-wheel drive at all. It's just kind of sitting there. You're not doing much with it. And some people will say then, like, that's why you don't need a massive overlanding rig if you're just commuting in and out to the city. But on the day there's snow, or on the day you have to drive across a piece of open ground, it's very, very useful to have that 4-wheel drive. And some people will have more use for a 4-wheel drive system than other people will. But whether it's just the confidence that you know you can leave the house in the morning and get to work if it's snowy or icy, or if it's the confidence to be able to go and do a small bit of off-roading one day every year, then is it worth having that 4-wheel drive system in place? And it's the same kind of system of trade-offs. You know, one might be more fuel or less fuel efficient, one might be more fuel efficient, one might be faster on the open road, or one might be better to drive. And it's the very same thing with these massively high strength numbers for field athletes. It is a bit of a trade-off. Like you're risking injury, you're putting more training capital or recovery capital into something else, but there are undeniable advantages to it.
The last question on this is American football stealing all of America's weightlifters?
No.
I don't think they are either. I think in one sense they are stealing them in the fact that just a large-scale participation of football, were it transferred to weightlifting, you'd be more likely to statistically hit a better quality of weightlifter. So if you had the tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people who play American football every year in the United States of America, but I don't think that the top level, the very, very best of the NFL, are the same people who would be able to transfer that over to weightlifting, or certainly not to a very high statistical degree across. Like, if we take 9 out of 10 American football players will be able to be a very high level weightlifter. Look, they'll definitely be very good to a certain extent if you put them into a good program and took enough gear and had good enough athletes from a young enough age. They're going to do well because they're good athletes across the board. But I don't think America are losing the Lashes to NFL. I don't think they're losing the name Solis to NFL. I don't think they're losing the Ilias. I think there's just too much of a deviation at the top, where when you zoom in for the elite performance of both of these sports, I think you'd see a large enough separation if you do zoom in on that graph enough.
Absolutely. And like, it is, people just see big, strong, powerful people and immediately think they'll be the good weightlifters. There's a lot of other factors going on there as well, you know. Like, even some morphology, leg length versus torso length is massive, upper leg to lower leg is massive, but also the psychological aspects of it. Being able to stick with weightlifting versus being able to stick with football is very, very different things. Being in an individual sport to being in a team sport is incredibly different. Being in a contact sport to a non-contact sport is incredibly different. So I definitely don't think, as you said, statistically, they definitely get a few more competitive international level weightlifters.
Oh, yeah.
But they're not, I don't think it would move the dial massively, to be honest.
I think you'd have a very, very strong team of weightlifters, of course, if you were to take these great athletes and train them for long enough. But I don't think you'd be really increasing your chances massively to hit that once in a generation, certainly on the male side anyway. So just before we finish, there's a 231 front squat from Aaron on his Instagram. So anything over a 200 kilo front squat is impressive, to be honest, for most people, given how rare it is.
Yeah, this is insane. Also, how nice this looks.
Yeah.
So on a similar note to how the clean looks, how good the clean is, 508 pounds, and it's really, really good. It's a great front squat.
I'll give him a pass on the backwards cap because he also plays football.
That's okay.
Yeah.
If it was just a weightlifter wearing a snapback backwards, if it even is a snapback.
That's not okay.
It's not okay.
Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to keep tagging us in our videos you want us to watch. Now, if you want to improve your clean, we have either a power clean or clean program. It's the Clean Up Your Clean program at seekastrength.com. It's 2 sessions per week, 8 weeks in length. It can be run for the power clean or the clean. There is specific changes in the program that you'll see when you get the program if you're running for the power clean or the clean, and then it peaks towards the end of it, and we have both athletes and full-time weightlifters running the program.